Hello, testing. Hello, 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 hello. Hello. Pavan, I'm streaming from here. I'm in a hospital room. Can you just see if I'm live or not? My class is supposed to be at 2:30. అంటే మీరు నాకు రైట్ సో నేను ఐఎమ్ ఇన్ ఫ్రంట్ ఆఫ్ ద కెమెరా ఇక్కడ నాకు కనిపిస్తున్నది కానీ యూట్యూబ్లో ఉందో లేదో తెలీదు చూసి మళ్ళీ నాకు చేయండి ఎస్ థ్యాంక్ యూ పవన్ చెప్పండి ఓకే థ్యాంక్ యూ సో ఐ క్యాన్ అది ఫుల్ స్క్రీన్ పెడతాను స్లైడ్ షో పెట్టిస్తాను ఓకేనా ఇప్పుడు రైట్ థ్యాంక్ యూ ప్లీజ్ क्या टाइमिंग है देख मेरा अभी क्लास शुरू होने वाला है वन से मेक यू कंफर्टेबल इस पे डाल दे
Madam, NBF till further also. If
The-
anything is there, press the bell.
Okay, it's dextrosaline, is it? DNS, sir?
This is NS only. This is report for NBF.
Thank you.
If you are having any discomfort, you tell me. I'll just write your name. This is good one only, no?
Emma, yeah, all.
I'll just write it. So today is not giving a minute. So fine. This position is okay for you? In the order, oh, yes, yes. Yes, ma'am. You can speak that time.
Is that light coming in your eyes? Walker light will be. नहीं मैंने AC को ज़्यादा लगा 25 और फैन को बंद आधी 10 and half an hour. Huh? All good. They did the introduction. It's benign. It has done interesting bigger than we anticipated. She said, yeah, was an interesting. I actually came inside as well. All right, I can see 108 people are online, so I think we'll start the class. Good afternoon. Today we will look a little bit at anatomical nomenclature. So let me maximize the screen and hope that all of you can hear me and see me clearly. All right, so this is the Latin name, Terminologia Anatomica. It just means the naming of things in the human body structures. So there was a federation, an international federation, that's a French word, which FCAT, of anatomical terminology, a conclave of the world which got together several times over the centuries. But the last one in 1998 is the one which decided by consensus on what each of the body parts, every little tiny minute detail would be called, would be agreed upon to be called, no matter which practitioner of modern medicine would be referring to it from anywhere across the world. So in the sense, that was the beginning of the shrinking together, the coming together of all of global medicine, where people agreed on what to call a certain thing, right? Otherwise the Greeks would call it hepar, but the Italians or the Latin derived system of medicine would call it liver. And so, we have so many words derived from ancient languages which are still used to refer to particular body parts. Hepar becomes hepatic, becomes hepatomegaly, hepatic carcinoma, so on and so forth, right? So unless you get a grip and a control and a mastery of the word hepar, you won't remember the whole tree of words which derive from it. So it will require a little industry on your part, but surely you will sooner or later master it. Now the miracle of technology is that I am beaming to you live from a hospital room. I am attending to my sister's post-op. She's just undergone a major surgery this morning. I couldn't be in the medical college, but I couldn't miss your class. And therefore e-learning is coming of age. And I'm hoping that all of you will be still able to make sense of what I'm saying, but I'll keep it short because I have to get back to her care. And tomorrow I will take it in more detail. But today let's just run the sounds by your ear, so that the words will start rolling off your tongue. And open your books, whatever little you have. I will give you a book list in tomorrow's class. There are a whole bunch of anatomical books available. If you have anything from anywhere, from your elder siblings or your neighbors or your friends or your thing, please access. Otherwise, you can just randomly browse the internet and begin your immersion in your own e-learning. See how many lakhs of websites will give you access. And there is a dictionary called Stedman's Medical Dictionary, Stedman, Stedman's Medical Dictionary. Probably you'll get an online version. See if you can access that and try to remember some of the words which I'm talking to you about. If you have a notebook and pen, it's good. You can at least write down what you see on the slides, and you can try to browse them if you haven't purchased a physical book yet. Tomorrow, I will give you definitive titles with authors, and you can start making your purchases. And we will also dive a little more deeper and faster into terminology. We describe the human body. We know that it can take a lot of positions, right? You could stand on your head, you could be an athlete or a gymnast or a contortionist. But we always describe anatomical position as if it's a live human being standing facing forward with the eyes focused at infinity. That means the gaze is parallel to the ground, right? The chin rested and also parallel to the ground, the floor of the mouth, right? The feet slightly apart, toes facing front. The arms hanging by the side, but palms facing the front. That means thumbs outside. Now, our resting position is not like that. Nobody actually stands like this. But everybody, the whole world, has agreed that this is how we will use the baseline position, according to which the naming of the body parts and the naming of the body movements will be done. So, anything which is closer to the head end will be called the superior aspect. If you're looking at this person from the top, it will be called a superior view or aspect. If you're looking from the bottom, we'll call it inferior. If you're looking from the right side, we'll call it right lateral. If you're looking from the left side, we'll call it left lateral. From the front, that means in front of the person, will be anterior. And from the back, can you see that red arrow? That will be called the posterior aspect. Now, these are the basic cardinal directions, right? The 6 sides from which you can view a cuboidal object. So it's like looking at a oblong structure standing on its short side, and it has a front, it has a back, it has a left side and a right side, and it has a top and a bottom, right? So those are the initial orientation which you must assume at all times. Now, when you see your cadaver and when you see your patient, most of the time they'll be horizontal on a bed, so this won't work. But if the patient is on the bed and this aspect of him or her is what you're looking down at, it is still the anterior aspect of that person, right? You're looking down at it, but you won't say superior. It's a superior view, but you still won't say superior. You'll say anterior aspect of the patient, right? So always the terminology is according to what we call the base anatomical position. Alright, now we can look at body parts also as a section, meaning that you can slice through the body, because again it's a cuboid or an oblong. You can slice through it in the 3 XYZ axis. You've done a little physics, right? So if your patient, your subject, is facing in the front, then the front aspect of him and the back aspect of him are not symmetrical. From the front it's different, and from the back it's different. Common sense. If you were to cut this body in such a way that the front aspect was one side and the back aspect was the other side, that section or that plane is this blue one called the coronal plane. That we don't so commonly do, but it's a new word, so I introduced it now. So we say, if you're taking a section through the body where the anterior aspect of the body and the posterior aspect of the body are separated by the plane, then we call that the coronal plane. It's supposed to go through a part of the head called the crown. So that's where corona means crown, and that's where it came from, again from Latin. We rarely use coronal plane, but in diagnostic imaging, when we're doing CT and MRI scans, we do take coronal sections. Sometimes it gives us an excellent view of what it is that we are searching for or what we are suspecting, which doesn't come from other views. But it's not a very common view. The most common one is this red pink one called the median or sagittal plane, because for all practical purposes, at least on the exterior aspect, it divides the human body into two exactly identical symmetrical halves, and it goes through the midline, right? So therefore median or sagittal plane. Now please see the spelling, S-A-G-I-T-T-A-L, not double G but double T, very important. Spelling is sacred. Please remember, there will be fatal mistakes if you don't pay attention to spelling, and all anatomists, all teachers will be punishing if you don't master your spellings. So start today, don't delay. Don't say, okay, I can correct myself later. It's very hard to correct. Learn the right spellings. Mug them if you have to. We learned APPLE, apple, didn't we? We said it 3,000 times. Now we don't have to think about it. It comes naturally to us. Same way, SAGITTAL must come in your sleep. It should be so natural to you. Sagittal. This sagittal plane is going to divide our subject, going through the midpoint at the top of the skull, through the midpoint of the nose, midpoint of the mouth, midpoint of the chin, midpoint of the center of the throat, between the two clavicles, middle of the sternum, and so on and so forth on the anterior side, and similarly the midpoint and the vertebral column midpoint, spines of the vertebra on the posterior side. And when you could separate the body into two symmetrical left, or rather two mirror image left and right halves, but your internal structures are not completely symmetrical, particularly within the abdominopelvic cavity. We'll come to that later. From the external aspect, at least, the median or sagittal plane gives you two equal halves. A third way to slice the body is the green one called the transverse or horizontal plane. This is an easy one to understand, where you're taking shortest sections through the body, but again, every section from top of the skull to bottom of your toes will be different. They don't resemble each other at all, because the shape, the contour, the internal structures change completely between head and neck and torso and hips and lower limbs and upper limb areas too. Here again, please remember, when you're taking a transverse section, it's as if the human being is alive, with relaxed shoulders, arms falling forward, arms falling at the sides. So when you take let's say a transverse section through a thoracic level, somewhere in the middle of the sternum, right? What we call T4, thoracic fourth vertebral level, you'll get the torso section, but you'll also get an upper arm section, one on the left and one on the right, because it's a live human being, and the slice is an imaginary or virtual slice being done electronically through our imaging media. So it allows us to get a real-time picture of what's happening inside that person at that particular level in the body. And since in dissection we will see for ourselves with our own eyes how those things are spatially related to each other, the interpretation of that in a live human being gives us a lot of information without having to cut through the body. So learning this becomes very, very important. This is the basis of all of radiodiagnosis, and therefore cross-sectional anatomy is something we will be paying a lot of attention to, and you must give a lot of effort for. So we have, again, in this picture, we covered superior aspect. Inferior aspect is from the beneath the feet, right? Then we said anterior aspect looking from the front. We said posterior aspect looking from the back, left lateral and right lateral. Those were the views or the aspects. These three, blue, pink and green, are the sections: coronal plane, sagittal plane and transverse or horizontal plane. So this much is more or less, I think, easy and clear enough. Now let's come to one more thing. This is only looking at the body which is still, stable, not doing any movement at all, not even blinking the eyes. Okay? Then all body parts will move against each other, and they will move in space. Right? So these movements again have been agreed upon universally to have certain names, and they are always done in pairs. So if you have a movement of the whole body moving forward, progressing on the anterior aspect, that we call the anterior movement or the anterior direction, and the opposite of that would be the posterior direction. In another way, if you're looking at aspect, we said anterior aspect. Another word for it is ventral. You remember that? Ventral. Venter is another word for stomach. So before we understood what a stomach is and what it does, the entire abdomen was considered to be a stomach, and so the anterior abdominal wall side is ventral. The opposite word is dorsal, which is, so it's anterior versus posterior and ventral versus dorsal, and dorsal is the back side, back of your skull, back of your back in general is dorsal. So remember those two, a pair of words. Then you have superior towards the head end or cranial, right? Because it's towards the cranium or the head end. Opposite of that is inferior or caudal. Cauda means tail. So since we are distant cousins of the hominid apes, of the higher apes, right? So they all have tails, even little docked ones, except perhaps gorillas and chimpanzees and bonobos, who are the closest to us. But caudal is something we still follow, very, very relevant even in the human being who has lost his tail, because we retain the tailbone called the coccyx. And there are very important developmental anatomy aspects where you will use the word caudal, or towards the tail end, or towards the tailbone side of the developing baby. We don't use that word caudal so much in an adult, in a born human being, as so much as a fetus. So superior or cranial, inferior or caudal, anterior or ventral, posterior or dorsal. And the third orientation would be medial, where towards the midline of the body, especially if you look at it at the sagittal section, towards the midline of the body is medial, away from the midline of the body is lateral. So this would be more medial, this would be more lateral, right? If there was a structure somewhere here, it would be neither in the midline nor on the outer lateral aspect of the body. But if you're talking about it, you will be talking about looking at it from the medial side, or at its medial relation, something which is medial to it or lateral to it. So when I'm saying A is medial to B, I'm saying A is more close to the midline. If I'm saying D is lateral to C, I'm saying D is further away from the midline. C is closer, D is further away, right? So these pairs of terms are about aspects or views or movements. And there are new words here which you have to learn, and you have to remember that they mean the same thing. Anterior means ventral, posterior means dorsal, inferior means caudal, cranial means superior. Lateral is lateral and medial is medial. There's no Greek and Latin over there. So we already covered the aspects. I've just magnified the same picture so that we can proceed a little further down. Now, if it is closer to the midline, we said it is more medially placed. If it's away from the midline, we said it is more laterally placed. Now, if anything is more closely placed towards a core or the center of the body, we call it proximal. And if it is further away, we call it distal. Because in linear structures, for example in the upper limb and in the lower limb, medial things may proceed, an artery or a vein or a nerve may proceed from proximal to distal. It will start in the axilla, in the armpit region, and it will proceed along the whole limb down to the toes, to the tips of the fingers. So a structure which is closer to the elbow is proximal, whereas a structure closer to the wrist is distal compared to each other. Alright? Or we may say that this particular structure can be traced from point something XYZ to point something else. Please just hang on a second. Just give me a minute, I need to get this going.